Caption close. A Pentagon Inspector General's report released Tuesday said the Army, Navy, Air Force, and Marine Corps often failed to submit fingerprint cards and final disposition reports for convicted felons as the law requires. The Air Force, which admitted it hadn't submitted information about Devin Patrick Kelly, a former airman who killed 26 worshippers at the First Baptist Church in Sutherland Springs last month, performed better than the other services but still failed to meet the reporting requirements, the report said. Kelly, who also wounded 20 people in the November 5 rampage, was shot twice by a church neighbor, chased on a highway until he crashed, and then shot himself dead. Nothing in federal databases prevented Kelly from buying 4 firearms starting in 2014, but there should have been, because he was convicted in 2012 for assaulting his wife and stepson. In a 2-year period ending December 31, 2016, the military failed to submit roughly 1 in 4 fingerprint cards, and almost a third of its final disposition reports, to the FBI's Next Generation Identification Database, a national computerized system for storing, comparing, and exchanging fingerprints and criminal histories, the study found. Tuesday's report confirmed a long-documented history, going back more than 20 years, of widespread failure by the military to submit conviction records to authorities. They have been failing to meet their requirements, and they've had report after report saying, "Fix it," as this report says, "Fix it," and yet it's never fixed, said retired Colonel Don Christensen, a former Air Force judge who served as the service's chief prosecutor. To me, that tells me it's not a priority with the leadership in the Pentagon to fix it, because if it was, it would have been fixed. Outrage and pending lawsuits against the service are going to have the attention, now, of leadership, and hopefully this time they'll take those recommendations seriously and make sure they are implemented, said Christensen, who heads a nonprofit called Protect Our Defenders, which advocates for military assault and sexual assault victims. The Pentagon reviewed 2,502 fingerprint cards for military service members convicted in courts-martial that should have been sent to the FBI's Criminal Justice Information Services Division for inclusion in the database and found 601, or 24%, were not. Of the same number of final disposition reports, 780, or 31%, were not submitted. The Air Force didn't submit 14% of its fingerprint cards while the Army failed to submit 28%. The Navy and Marines each failed to submit 29% of their fingerprint cards. The Air Force failure rate for forwarding final disposition reports was 14%, but it was 36% for the Navy and Marines and 41% for the Army. The Pentagon Inspector General reported similar failure rates from a 2010 to 2012 period in a study released in February 2015. It also found that the services weren't consistently submitting other required data that includes the nature and type of offenses and characteristics of crime victims. And the services failed to collect or forward DNA samples of sexual assault suspects 8% of the time, and their fingerprints 20% of the time during an 8-month period in 2012.